This is Future Sense Now, where we explore the landscape and byways of our shared futures. Future Sense Now is brought to you by the Futures Forum. Stay tuned for a journey to the futures of women with host Dr. Claire Nelson.
Greetings and welcome to Future Sense Now, an online e-magazine of the Futures Forum. So it's March 2019 and it's Women's History Month, and we're celebrating with an exploration into the future history of women, Women 2030 and beyond. And why 2030? Well, UN Sustainable Development Goal 5 speaks specifically to the development and inclusion of women. Now, in a production of mine earlier this year, Providential's Prospectus, a trend report on what women futurists are watching. Last year, indeed, women futurists were watching the increasing trend of women seeking elected leadership, starting their own business organizations and nonprofits increasing all around the world. And it is indeed happening. So what else might we see emerging in the future history of women? In this segment, I will speak with JOYCE, and she is a globe-trotting celebrity futurist with a long history of providing the Herman Trend Report to corporations and small business all across the world. I look forward to having her share with me her ideas. So welcome, JOYCE. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking. I just got back from New Orleans from my high school reunion, which was great fun. And looking forward to leaving for Dubai in 2 days. So
there you go. I know you were somewhere else. Weren't you somewhere else just before New Orleans, in some other country?
Yes, and I can't remember. Oh yes, I was in Denmark, right?
There you go.
To speak at CIFS, yes, the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, yes.
Ah, fantastic. So actually, you're going to give us a really good sense of maybe the different viewpoints around the world. So we want to start with this UN 2030, which I am an avid follower of, an acolyte, or whatever we call the word,
acolyte or disciple, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, of the UN and its goals. And it says we resolve between now and 2030 to end poverty and hunger everywhere, combat inequalities, to protect human rights, and promote gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Now, as a futurist that is looking at the future of work, and I know this is one a big area for you, how do you see the empowerment of women and girls emerging against a future where the future of work and what kind of work might be available is up in question?
Well, it's really interesting that we're having this conversation on this very day, because just last week, as I was preparing to go to Bahrain, I'm in Bahrain, by the way. I'm going to be speaking about the future of women and why women make better leaders. And yes, I was looking at the graduation rates in Bahrain, and women graduate at significantly higher rates, almost double to men in Bahrain. And that's high schools and colleges.
No, that's
figure that. Huh?
Guys, that's an interesting statistic which I really had not been paying attention to. One gets the impression, certainly, and I'm not sure if you've been to Bahrain or Dubai before, but one gets the impression from the people that I have met recently coming out of that space, certain women, that there is certainly in Dubai a women's leadership in the government spaces. I'm not so sure about the private sector, but certainly in the public sector spaces. So when you think about this move towards greater automation and a greater use of AI, how are you viewing women's role? You said you make better leadership, but why are you saying that?
No, well, okay, so let's talk first things first, Claire.
Yes.
The women are graduating at higher rates in most places in the world right now, and that's in the US, in Europe, in South America, in the Middle East even. I mean, that really blew my mind when I saw that. And because we are graduating at higher rates, that means that we are more prepared to move into leadership positions than many of our male counterparts, which is going to really cause some very interesting disruption in leadership in multinational corporations, because the coveted high leadership positions are going to go to the best qualified individuals, and in many cases the best qualified individuals 15 years out, 20 years out, are clearly going to be women. Now, let me go back and answer your question based on the research that I've done, and the research of an interesting organization called Zenger Miller, which is a very well-respected consulting firm in the US. And they actually looked at a wide variety of different areas in terms of what we value in our leaders. And it's things like empathy and compassion and coaching, someone who's willing to coach people to higher performance, and all kinds of different ways of perspectives and ways of looking at leadership. And consistently the women who were rated more highly than their male counterparts. Fascinating, really fascinating.
So then what we're seeing now in terms of signals such as the CEO of IBM or the former CEO of Pepsi, I think she stepped down recently, CEO of Home Depot, who's from my island home, Jamaica. I'm so proud of her. Are you saying that we're going to expect to see more of the same?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And see, part of the problem now is that we haven't had enough women in the pipeline. And if we haven't had enough women in the pipeline, then we're not going to be able to move them up. So as more women come into this pipeline, we'll have more highly qualified women, and they will be moved into leadership positions.
Now, do we then want to juxtapose that with the need for a change in paradigm around the type of role, in this case, the private sector ought to play in the future? Because, for example, we're looking at issues around social protection policies, issues around parental leave. Do you see, I know the US is probably the most backward in that case, but do you see in the US more women coming into power of leadership in private sector, beginning to change those policies in the private sector in this country?
Yes, because it matters to them personally. And because they see it more acutely, because they've been there and done that.
Yeah. Well,
right?
Assuming they've had children, because many women have had to forego having children in order to build their careers, and then at 45, 50, they look around. I might want to put myself in that category and go like, really, what did I do? So not that you walk around with regrets, but you certainly wonder, well, what if I had made a different choice? So my question, I guess, is, as you think about women in the future, are the women that are emerging now, let's say those in their 30s and 40s who are rising stars in corporate leadership, are they going to have to make the same choices that women of our era who came into being in the 80s and 90s have to make?
I don't think so. And yet, I have two daughters. I have three daughters total, but two who have children. And my oldest daughter has two precious children, ages almost 4 and almost 6. Yeah, 6.5. And she waited to have children until she was like 41, I think. I had a child at 40 and a half.
Yeah.
So I know that it is possible to do. I mean, no question the biological clock is ticking. And there will be some women who choose not to have children, and have very successful, fulfilling lives without being mothers.
Well,
And there are others who will choose. And what I'm saying is that there are enough highly qualified women, excuse me, who do have children, who are pushing organizations in the right direction. Let me give you another example.
Yeah.
Daughter number 2.
Yes.
Who is now in her mid-40s. And she has 3 little boys and lives out in California. And she's an endocrinologist. She's actually the research fellow for the entire Scripps medical organization for diabetes research, for new diabetes treatments.
Yes.
And she's been working 60% time for as long as I could remember. I mean, she took time off for maternity leave 3 times, but then she's been working 60% of her time. And Scripps has 3 of them or 4 of them who are working around motherhood. And Scripps is now able to get the best and the brightest endocrinologists because of that flexibility.
Yeah, that shift. As I heard you talk about childbearing age and making choices, I just realized actually that may not be a choice that you have to make anymore, because science now allows you to have surrogates. So if you don't really feel the need to walk around for 9 months pregnant, you can simply hire a womb.
That's true. I never thought about it that way.
I really want to put that as a question to you. I mean, you're always out there scouting signals of the future. How do you see the reproductive conversation playing out? I mean, we have a very strange place to be in America right now. On the one hand, there's all this change, and then there's this pushback. How do you see that playing out?
Well, without getting into too much of a political conversation,
yes,
I do believe that we're going to see the pendulum swinging back in the other direction, happily. At least that's my perspective. And women's reproductive rights will come to the fore, and we'll be in a much better position than we are with our current leadership in Washington, D.C. It causes the majority of women in this country to be upset when they see what's been happening.
Yeah, and in fact, that plays into the certain dystopian view of the role of women in society. And indeed, one wonders if this is not part of a potential backlash. We're talking about futures emerging in a particular way, but then you talk about also having a backlash. Is what we're seeing now part of the backlash because women are moving forward?
I think it's part of the backlash because we all had many of us had our consciousness raised when Donald Trump was elected, and many of us had become very complacent. Unfortunately for us, democracy is not a spectator sport, and we have learned the hard way. And many of us, the day after he was elected, were marching in the streets with the Women's March. And we have not stopped being active in politics, in pushing,
Ah,
and we cannot stop if we want to have more intelligent minds prevail.
and a more sustainable society. Because
Yes.
indeed, what we're talking about as we talk about the global agenda, and I mean, everything is local, we understand that. But certainly from my perspective, and my interest in how local, aggregates to global, my thing is, how do we have a conversation that can be multiplied, amplified, and shared to have people begin to imagine the future differently? Um, and so this is part of what hopefully this conversation will do to people who hear it. So we're talking about backlash, but now we're seeing the pendulum swift. We see elections with more women in Congress than ever before. So that certainly made a difference.
Yay!
How do you think, as we talk about leadership, so we talk about leadership in the private sector, leadership in the political sector, how do you think the convergence around women's desire to say, have homes that are thriving and families that are thriving, how does that converge then with this idea of the future of work, where it seems to be that it's causing disruption and lack of jobs and more unemployment? Do you think that women might take the time to have more assessments of the implications of these choices, or if there are enough of them in power? I mean, how do you think that might play out?
That's lots of questions that you asked me.
Sorry.
I'll do my best to answer them all.
Unpack them. Yes, sorry.
So yes, I see the world changing to accommodate women more.
Mm-hmm.
I see more on-site childcare and more companies recognizing that they have to take care of their parents. And I include male employees in that as well, because young fathers are taking more of an active leadership role in the families as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I am seeing those changes, and they can't come fast enough as far as I'm concerned. But then again, I've always been impatient
Mm-hmm.
for progress. I believe that companies will recognize that if they want to capitalize on their young women who are talented, and those young women have children, that there will not be a choice.
Yeah.
That they will have to step up to the plate. And by the way, one of our new people who wants to be our nominee for president, is pushing for universal childcare
Mm-hmm.
for women who want to work, or for parents who want to work.
Yeah.
And it's in my view, you talked about the US lagging behind the rest of the world. Amen, sister. It's really true. And when I was in Denmark, it was very interesting. Their attitude is different than ours. It is more inclusive than ours. I walked into this office of this very, very well-respected think tank, and the CEO's desk was in the middle of the room, near the desk of someone who was just starting out. I mean, there are no, they don't have the kind of caste system and classism that we do here in the United States. There are no corner offices.
Really?
The CFO was acting as receptionist. And
Wow.
it was fascinating to me that their attitude is much more all for one for all. We need to support everybody in being all each of us can be.
Huh? I may have to consider a trip to Denmark. With that,
Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it.
certainly, I think as we talk about this idea of spaceship Earth having no passengers, that we're all crew, the model for most of us in certainly in the developing world, certainly those of us who belong to the Commonwealth, is the model of the British system, which is very much class-based. And so in order for us to, let's say, very rapidly make some changes we have to make in leadership in these organizations, we have to be able to see new paradigms of leadership being modeled for us. So as when you look at what you just experienced, how would you attempt, if you could, to transfer or translate some of that what you saw to the American space?
I don't see it transferring anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I see a huge progressive movement. I see a large number of young women now in Congress, very exciting, in the House. And that is very encouraging to me. I'm very optimistic about what our future can be. I believe that women leaders will be more empathetic. You know, interestingly, my husband much prefers, and I found out my brother, who is also a physician, much prefers women doctors.
Really? That's
Yes, because they listen more.
I see. So we're talking then about 2030, which is a pull year. A lot of companies have tried to certainly arrange your CSR goals, the energy goals, your water goals in keeping with this. So we're talking about leadership specifically based on what you have been researching on the future of work. And I want to come back to the question about automation and loss of jobs.
Yes.
A lot of the automated jobs are low-end jobs that a lot of women occupy, women who are, you know, working at the lower end of the wage scale. How do you see women of that, let's say, economic part of society preparing for this future?
One of the things I talk about, I'm on TV, I'm considered a celebrity futurist, and that's just because I'm on television talking about the future. And one of the things I talk about when I'm on television, and I did this in New Zealand as well, is 3 mistakes to avoid to not lose your job to a robot.
All right, so what are they?
Well, that's what I was getting to. One of the things that we all need to do to make sure that we don't lose our jobs to automation is to stay on the leading edge, to learn the new technologies. And if we see that there's a change in our industry, to look for ways to use our skills and abilities somewhere else. And it's not going to be easy for a lot of people because there are many people who are older, who do not like technology, who don't know how, who don't have the same facility with computers that you and I do. And they are just not prepared to learn, to jump in and learn those new technologies. It's not going to be a bright future for them. And that's one of the things I say, you must stay on the leading edge, not only with the technologies that are used in your industry, but also make sure that you know what's going on with the competition. Make sure that you know what's going on in your organization.
Yeah.
So that you can stay informed and make sure that you don't get left behind.
Well, that's certainly something because even in the future space, a lot of people are talking about AI replacing the need to have strategists and futurists like we do, work that we do. But of course, people are saying, well, not quite so fast, because even though they might be able to crunch the data faster, they may not be able to interpret it as well as somebody who can see it.
And if you know what Michael Jackson is doing with Athena,
yes.
I mean, it's just, it's like zooming forward into the future.
Yeah, so when you think about, as a matter of fact, a quick kind of sidebar on that note, one of the things that came up most recently is the fact that so many of these service assistants have female personas. So somebody said that that was sexist and that needs to be neutral, gender neutral service. What's your quick response to that?
That would be very interesting. Well, now let's go back and think about this, right?
Yeah.
What did I talk about? I said women are more highly valued because they're empathetic, right? And therefore, and there's an association of a woman's voice, a woman's persona with empathy. So automatically people are going to be more open.
Got you. So that's the reason why. I was wondering, is it, because I was saying, is it really a sexist thing or is it a good business practice thing, you know? I hear what you're saying. So come back to the point I was really going to make was, so would you agree that hashtag the future is female?
I beg your pardon?
Would you agree with this statement, hashtag the future is female?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't hear. I have a t-shirt that says that. Thank you, thank you, Samantha, for giving it to me. I love that t-shirt.
Why do you believe the future is female?
For many of the reasons that I've already talked about, because more women are seeing the value of education and staying in school and graduating with degrees. 20 years ago, when I did work with the top company in veterinary medicine in the United States, one of the things they told me was that more than 98% of the veterinarians that were graduating here in the United States were women.
Oh, wow.
And
so where are the men? I mean, have you done any research that shows where are the men, where are they going to be? Are they just dropping out? Are they going to prison? What's happening with the men?
I'm seeing more men actually supporting high achieving women than ever before.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So the roles are changing.
Yes.
So leadership, if I might paraphrase, you're saying leadership is going to continue to have more and more a feminine face or a feminized features.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
So now to come back to the UN Global Agenda, there's 17 goals from water to energy to inequality to the ocean. If you had to pick one of the global challenges as a focal point for your work, which one would you choose and why?
I need to review them to give you the answer to that. And for whatever reason,
but what comes up, because there are many global challenges. When you think about the global challenges, what's the one that stands out for you?
For me, the one that stands out is climate change.
Okay, there you go.
Because I see climate change affecting everything and everybody. Yeah. I see it even to looking at security and safety and sustain. When we look at having water to drink,
yes,
I mean, the stewardess, the flight attendant came through the aisle this morning, and she was handing out bottles of Dasani water, and I said, I'm not taking water from you guys until you stop serving junk water. So then what happens? I go to we leave the parking spot, which is where we parked the car for 5 days while we were in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And what do? They hand me another bottle of junk water. It wasn't Dasani, so I had to look at the label. But when I looked at the label, what did I see? Enhanced with minerals for taste. You know what You know, the translation of that is?
What?
We use potassium chloride and magnesium sulfate to hide the taste of chlorine.
Okay.
And it was reverse osmosis water.
So let me ask you a question. So when I know you do regularly a trend report, the Herman Trend Report.
Yes. I've written about junk water.
Have you written about climate change in this work?
Oh, I've written about climate change. Yes.
Yeah.
On a number of occasions. And
Yeah.
believe it or not, still, every time I do, I get one or two responses from somebody on my list. Well, you'd expect that with 29,000, right?
Yeah.
And they say, oh, you've been taken in by the establishment, that there is no such thing as climate change. Horse pucky, I say to them.
I need to figure out. That's a nice way to put it. As we draw to a close, this is Women's History Month, and one of my reasons for doing these conversations every year is because I really want us to be intentional about the stories that we're creating now and the stories we're telling ourselves. And I really want us to be bold about stating what it is we want and using these visions of the future we want to inform like some of the work we do, like all the speeches you do, for example. So what is a headline from 2030 about women that you would like to see?
Wow. Okay. I would like to see more women leaders on boards and in the ozone. And I believe that that's going to happen before 2030. I don't know how soon around the world, but there are many countries that are saying we must have X number of women on boards, X number of percentage of women on boards, on our leadership, on our boards. And Marriott Corporation just announced that they're putting like a 5th or 7th woman on their board of 14 people. I think it's number 5. She's number 5 of 14. And Meg McCarthy has a great background. And there are many women who have had leadership positions in other organizations, who are former CEOs, who have new perspectives. And organizations will do best when they do bring these women onto their boards. And by the way, no kidding, organizations that are led by CEOs who are women,
yes,
have higher profitability.
Well, there you go. So I think one last question. Should we be optimistic, pessimistic, or neutralistic about this headline that you're seeing?
Long ago, I decided that optimism was the only way to go because there was no future in being pessimistic, no future that I wanted to be part of anyway. And as I travel around the world and have an opportunity to talk to people and to affect them with my messages of hope and inspiration, I talk about how they can live their dreams as they support others to be successful and achieve their full capability.
Well, I think that's a very good place to end our great conversation. Joyce, JOYCE, celebrity futurist, and globetrotter, we're so delighted you could spend this time with us.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah. Well, that's it, folks. We want to thank you for joining us on another edition of Future Sense Now, where we explore salient ideas for sustainable futures. We have indeed come to an end of this great conversation, but the story continues being written by all of us. Remember that creating the future we want is our shared responsibility, and it is better for us to act as the parent of our future than the child of our past. So seize the day, and as we say in Jamaica, walk good. Safe journeys.
You have been listening to Future Sense Now with Dr. Claire Nelson, brought to you by the Futures Forum. For more, please visit www.thefuturesforum.org. Thank you for listening. Spread the word. Share the future.